He had a whole pot when he first came.
Yeah, I had the whole, Bob actually gave me the whole entire,
Yeah.
well, my name is Bill Story. I'll be working at the Carter Mansion, which is a branch of Sycamore Shoals State Park up in Elizabeth, Tennessee. And what we have today is a small pottery shard here, or a piece of a pot. And what we need to talk about, I guess, is I'll pass that around, let everyone look at it. There's things we do obviously know about this, and then again, there's things we don't know about this. First of all, some of the things that we can tell from it, that it is made of clay, and it's obviously used as some sort of a vessel, probably either storage or as a carrying capacity. You can tell it was made by a fairly skilled craftsman, mainly due to the decoration on the sides, and pottery itself is a very skilled craft. So we do know whoever did make this object really put some time and some effort into the object itself. Now, some of the things we really may not know or really don't know is, for example, who did make this thing. Maybe that's something we need to discover ourselves. Or how old is the item itself. Not being an archaeologist, I have no way myself of knowing this. But we can check it out, look at it, see, compare styles, and see what we can find out about the object. Now, what is really important about this object itself? What it does do, it tells us a lot about the culture of the people who did make this. We do know they had some sort of skills. They were not just quote-unquote savages roaming around in the wild. They did have some domicile, some place to reside if they're going to take time to make their pottery, to store it. As well, this vessel itself could have been used as carrying water. We see where there was a handle on here at one time or another. Now, it could be used probably to carry water, making it easier to pour. However, there could have been another handle on the other side, we don't have enough of it to tell, where it could have been used to carry something heavier. So we can't really get a true size of the vessel. But what it does do, it shows us that we can learn something about a people, whether this be a Native American pottery shard or whether it was made later by someone else. We can get a handle on what they were like, that they had taken the time to reside somewhere. And all else, if there's another clue, I guess, right there, little inscribed, you can see the little Made in Taiwan sticker. No, I'm just joking. Okay.
All right. Yeah. It is. All right, who's next? Come just go down my list, call out names. You want to do one? Oh, do one, Bill, man. Use that banana. Tropical fruits.
You don't want me to interpret this banana.
I guess I'll go next. Nobody else.
All right.
I'll give you that one. Get my specimen.
Oh.
Yeah. My name is Chadwick Bliss, and I'll be working at Round Mountain State Park. And I have here, it looks like a bullfrog to me. Genus is Rana, species is Catspiana, and it is an amphibian. And most people look at this and say, what good, it's just a frog, why don't we care about the frogs? And if you find an abundance of these in an area, then there's not going to be very much pollution in an area. I mean, there's a concept called biomagnification, where frogs and toads eat insects, and if there's a lot of mosquitoes around, and suppose there's a pesticide or chemical that the insects have accumulated in their body, and these are eating a large amount of them, then the concentration of that in the frog or toad's body is going to be more. And suppose fish are eating the bullfrogs, then we catch the fish and eat them. As you go up the food chain, there's going to be more and more concentration of that pesticide and that chemical, and the higher the concentration gets, the more it could be detrimental to the organism, whether it's us or another animal. And I guess if you can tell, some people do catch these to eat, so you can get it like that. And there are two game species of amphibians in Tennessee, which very few people know about. One is the bullfrog, and the other is northern dusky salamander, which people used to fish with. And I guess I could pass him around. And these do have a mating call, which you can hear. And I believe the mating range on this is China, if I'm not mistaken, because if you flip him over, he says, I came from China. Okay. And I don't believe you'll get warts from it since it's not a toad or anything. I guess that concludes my little speech.
Okay. My name's Amy Duggins. I'll be working here at Cumberland Mountain. And actually, I'm very glad that you all brought me this today, because it actually takes a very astute nature observer to know that this is special. I'm not going to pass it around. What I wish I could do is for you all to gather around close to me, but since we're videotaping, you'd probably get in the way. But all of you, after this is over, can probably walk 2 feet outdoors and find one of these and pick it up and look at some of these things that I'm going to be pointing out. What makes this so special? Well, you have to look at it maybe a little more closely than we're used to. I don't know if you're like me. We walk past things like this every day of our life out in the woods, if we're living in the woods, and don't give it a second glance. I mean, it's just an old pine branch, you know. Why would you look at that? But if you take a little bit of time to look at it closer, you can see some of the things that are more special about it. Since we're such a visually oriented people, you know, you can start with your eyes, that's fine. And if you pick one of these up and take a look at it, and look real close, what seems to be this sort of drab gray-brown of the branches, you look in and you start seeing green and red, and things that look like little lichens maybe taking hold, and things that you wouldn't expect at all. As far as what kind of a pine this is, another thing that you can look closely for are these needles are actually not just singly coming out of the branch, they're in little bundles. And this one in particular, if you look real close, you can see in every bundle there's 5 needles. And so if you were like trying to find out what it is and looking it up in a book or something, that's one of the ways you would use to key it out and find out what kind of a pine it is. Some other things are just feeling it. I mean, yeah, well, it feels rough. You'd expect that. One thing you might not expect is since it's dead, it doesn't feel nearly as prickly as a live pine that you're used to feeling. You feel this, it's almost soft. Even if you go like this, it doesn't prick you as much as a normal one would. Other surprises in this, one is that, well, this was, since it's cut off of the branch, you know, obviously just knocked off. But even though this is an evergreen tree, it's true that evergreen trees occasionally lose some of their needles by themselves, just like deciduous trees would. And I guess maybe the most pleasant surprise about this is if you take it up and you smell it and you take a sniff. It's a beautiful smell, and I encourage you all to try that after we get out.
My name is Brian Ward, and I'll be working at North Dam State Park. And thanks for handing me this little piece of green leaf here. And this particular is a hemlock. And I guess what you've noticed was the light green at the end of the branches. And why do you suppose it's lighter green at the end of the branches and it's darker toward the bark of the tree? New growth. Yeah, there's that's kind of interesting. You can tell how far a tree grows in a year by the new growth. You know your nose doesn't get any longer each year. You can't tell how tall you're going to get the next year, how much you grew the year before, but you can with a tree. And that's kind of interesting. Also, you can tell on this one. I'm not so sure if you can or not, but I know pine trees. You can tell just how good a year it was the year before by how long the light green part was and how much water did it get. And so that's an interesting way we can go through the woods and look and ask, well, gee, I wonder how much water rained here last year and just how good a year it was for pine trees. So I'll just leave you that. Next time you go out and look at a plant and you see the little light green, you know, it's how good a year was it last year. Also, one other thing is this is an indicator of spring. It's a beautiful spring. You'll see the light green growth on a plant.
My name is Jackie Taylor, and I'm a seasonal at Fall Creek Falls State Park. And what I have here today is probably the fastest growing piece of tissue known to man, and that's the deer antler. Okay, now, what happened to the rest of this animal? I mean, how did we come across an antler laying there? Did the animal die? I mean, is this just remains of a dead carcass? Actually, what happens is that the deer shed their antler every year. And what happens? They shed it like other animals may lose some of their fur towards the end of winter because summer's coming on. They'll lose their antlers at the end of winter. During the summer, they'll get new growth, new antlers. And as the antlers are growing, they're covered with little hairs. And these little hairs looks like velvet, a velvety appearance. And this is a protective coating. So when the antler grows, it sort of protects it. But after the antler has grown, it's kind of like an irritant to the deer, kind of like peeling skin on a sunburn for us. It's just an irritant, we're going to scratch it. So the deer are going to take their antlers and rub them up against trees to try to get the velvet off. Okay, and every year they'll shed their antlers. Now, if every male deer is shedding their antlers, why aren't we stumbling all over these, all over the place, like we trip over a log on the trail? I mean, you should find these everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of deer out there, and every year, they're going to be shedding them. This is a very important thing in the environment as far as the ecosystem is concerned, because you've got all the other little animals, bugs, maybe mice, that will actually eat or gnaw on the deer antlers, and that's their source of calcium. So nothing goes to waste in the woods. Even in the history, even in the past, different cultures have myths around different things in the woods, namely deer and antlers. Even the Cherokee have myths. And they have a little legend that it's kind of like, think of it as a bedtime story that they would tell children. They wouldn't necessarily believe it, but if a kid comes up and says, "Why does a deer have antlers?" This is how an old Cherokee would answer him. He would say, long ago, when the animals used to be able to talk to one another and talk to man, they always used to have questions and compete and so forth. And one thing the animals always wondered is who was the fastest animal in the woods. Okay. Now you've got this cocky little jackrabbit, and you've got the deer. All the animals believed the deer was the fastest, but the jackrabbit, he thought that he was hot stuff, he was sly, he was the fastest. So they decided one day to have a race. To make a long story short, the animals picked a route through the woods, long and windy and so forth, and they get them ready, and the marks get set, and the deer and the rabbit are going to race. The rabbit says, wait a second. I don't know this trail. I don't know this area of the woods. I don't know where I'm going. I'm going to lose if you don't let me look at the trail. So reluctantly, the animals let the rabbit go. Well, the rabbit goes, and he's gone for hours. He's just gone. Finally, he comes back, and some of the animals decide to check up on him. And so what the rabbit had done was gnawed his way through the brush and through the briar, a straight path, so that when they said go, he could be there and he would win. Okay? Well, when the animals found this out, they disqualified that rabbit and gave the rack, the prize, to the deer. And this is why the deer have antlers today. And also, if you think about it, you might have some kids say, well, why do deer lose their antlers? And we really can't answer that question. It's just a natural thing that happens to deer. They shed their antlers once a year. But what you could do, maybe in our future, maybe we'll have a legend or a little myth, a little story that we can tell a kid on why a deer loses their antlers. We just need somebody creative, like maybe you, think it up. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Wendy Weiser, and I'll be working at Fall Creek Falls State Park this summer. What I have here is an acorn. Now, I think most of us have seen acorns like laying on the ground around an oak tree, because this is an oak tree seed. Now, as we know in nature, small things aren't important, right? Most of the small things aren't important. Well, that's not true, because from this little seed, a great big oak tree can grow. Now, one thing that people may not know about acorns is that they were a great big source of food for early settlers. And we can still eat them today, but they may taste bitter. So a way to make your acorn not taste bitter is to first get one that you can eat. Now, the way you can find out that you can eat the acorn is to put it in water, and if it floats, you can't eat it. And you can take these acorns, you can put them in water, and you boil them for, say, 2 minutes, and you change the water every now and then. So you can eat acorns today still. There's one thing very special about this acorn, and I encourage you, like along walks and things, to pick up acorns and to look at them, because they're very special. This one happens to be a home. He is a home for a small worm, because he has a little hole in him, so he would probably float and you would be able to eat him. That's about it.
Okay, my name's Steve Cole. I'm going to be working at Panther Creek State Park near Morristown, Tennessee this year. And what I have here with me now is what I have a pretty good idea of what I think it is, but rather than come right out and explain to you what it is, I may like to go through a little question and answer type sequence, and we can learn about what this thing is together. I'm not really positive as to what it is, like I said, but I've got a good idea. It's obviously something of a planting material. It's obviously on the floor now. Found this under an oak tree, so I've got a pretty good idea that it came from probably an oak tree. And what we just heard from oaks, we talked about the acorns that come from oaks. A lot of people overlook these things, and they too come from oak trees. this is a type of oak flower, and it's a real important part of the oak tree itself. People, like I said before, they think of the oak, they think of the acorn, and sometimes these little things are overlooked, and they've got a lot to do with oak tree production. If you strip it off, you can see pollen floating every which way. Sorry, Bob. They're real important, and even though it's small, it lies on the ground, it's overlooked a lot of times. It's just as important as an acorn as far as oak tree production goes. And I guess I'll end it with that little note right there. Thanks.
I'm Jenny Small, and I'm a seasonal naturalist at Pickett State Park. And I have here a very ordinary looking rock, but it has some special traits and characteristics, and believe it or not, rocks are important to you. What are some uses of rocks besides throwing it at your neighbor or your younger brother or sister?
Building materials.
Building materials, that's a good one. A very important industry in this area.
Make good weights.
Good weights, okay. Well, believe it or not, without the rocks underneath the soil, we wouldn't be standing here very comfortably. Rocks support the land that we live on. They also make the soil. When a rock breaks down into smaller fragments and pieces, you end up with the raw material of soil. Now, you don't have true soil until you add living things to the system. Rock fragments in and of themselves are not a soil. You cannot plant a garden in a gravel pile. For one thing, the pieces are too large. For another thing, they're missing things, parts that aren't there. You need water, air, and you also need living things. Now, you don't find big animals living in the soil as a general rule. You find things like bacteria, fungi, earthworms, a lot of invertebrates. And if you're really lucky, you might find a mole or a chipmunk house or a mouse house. But they don't really live there. They just, they stay there, they shelter there, but they don't earn their living in the soil. Now, this particular rock, you can tell what it is because when you hold it and feel it, it has a very rough texture, and if you look at your hands carefully after holding it, you'll notice that there are small pieces of material in your hand, pieces of material you're probably familiar with, either from a sand pile as a child or from the beach. This is a piece of sandstone, and it's a very weathered piece of sandstone, otherwise I wouldn't be able to stand here and break pieces of it off. Thanks.
Let's see, let's go down here.
I'll do it. I'm Christy Hammer. I'm a seasonal naturalist at Big Ridge State Park this summer. And someone has just brought me this leaf, and it is one leaf. It's not 5. It's one leaf that's made of 5 leaflets. And it's from a hickory tree. Now, I'm not sure what kind of hickory it is, because around here there are lots of hickories. There are shagbarks and bitternuts and mocker nuts and pig nuts and all kinds of things. And I'm not that good a tree person to know which type it is. But you know it's a hickory because it does have the 5 leaflets and the way the leaflets are shaped and everything, and it smells kind of spicy, and that's kind of the way most hickories do. But you'll notice this has been picked for a little while and it's starting to wilt. Why is it wilting? Exactly. And it's not attached to the tree anymore, so it can't get the water and the nutrients it needs, so it'll stay a little stiffer than it is. And how do you suppose that water gets up to the leaves in the trees? I mean, it's kind of going against gravity. You know, you've got your tree and there's water in the ground and everything, and they've got their roots there, but all the leaves are up in the top of the tree. So how do you suppose the water gets to the top of the tree? Well, these leaves
have a very important part in getting the water to the top of the tree, because they evaporate water from glands on the leaves. And how they get the water up there is through the wood itself. The wood acts kind of like, the trunk of the tree acts kind of like a straw. You know, when you suck on a straw, you pull water up from the bottom of a cup. And it's just like in a tree, when the water evaporates off the leaf, it needs more water, and so it pulls just a little bit. The water that it evaporated, it replaces it with water that was just a little bit below that, and the interior of the tree acts as kind of a straw. So, with this leaf not attached to that tree anymore, it can't get water. At the same time, by picking this leaf off, we're depriving that poor little tree of a little bit more water, so we shouldn't pick any more leaves off trees if possible. Thanks.
Observing the tree.
Oh, Lash LaRue.
Here we go.
Indiana Jones.
Well, I'm Shane Farner, and I'll be working at the David Crockett Birthplace up near Greenville, Tennessee, on the banks of the Great Nolichucky River this summer. And I was walking around down on the cabin, and I came across this whip. And I suppose if you've been walking around down 1786 around the cabin there, you'd probably found something like this, or another one that would have looked a little similar to this. And I got to thinking, you know, how could we compare this to something we had today? You don't see many whips around anymore. In various places you do, but I was thinking that you know, they use something like this, like as an accelerator. You know, we've got our car, we've got a gas pedal, an accelerator. Well, back then, you know, they used something like this, you know, to accelerate their horses, or even if they were in the fields plowing with their oxen, they would use something like this to accelerate them and make them go on and things like that. And if you don't, okay, if you've got a whip and you don't have something, if you just, you know, I'm not going to strike it in here, but if it strikes you, you just strike air. But you've got to have something at the other end to make it work, to make the whip work. And I've also understood that some people were so skilled, like not really to, like it's, you have a horse and the flies are just swarming the horse, and if you know, if you want to help the horse out a little bit, you know, and get some flies off him, some people were so skilled just to crack the whip and crack a fly off the back, you know, but you know, to help the horse out a little bit. So there's various ways these whips were used, and I'll end it with a little story. We were talking last night. Christy and I were talking about spankings and little whippings when we were young kids. And I remember going to my grandmother's house, and she had a big old weeping willow tree in her yard. And if I behaved a little bit, misbehaved a little bit, my mother would go out to that willow tree, and she'd get a big old long willow switch, and she'd come in there, and that I started thinking about this, and she'd get one about that big too, and it'd wrap all the way around me. But yeah, whips are just used for various things. So if you're up around the Crockett cabin, you happen to see one of those, and you have some kind of pretty good idea what they were used for back in 1786. Thanks a lot.
All right, Meg.
Ready? Hi, my name is Meg Ross, and I'm going to be working here at Cumberland Mountain State Park. And before we go on our bird count, I'd like to share a treasure with you that I found the other day. Now, I'm not sure what kind of nest this is, but with a little bit of deductive reasoning, you can tell it's not an eagle nest. But I'd imagine it's some kind of warbler or smaller bird, but I'm not sure. But that doesn't really matter. I'd like you to think about today as we go on our bird count, not just seeing how many species you can identify and how fast and who can get the most. This nest, I think, makes a statement about the craftsmanship of nature. If you went to the barn and I told you to make this nest, and you'd have to pick up every horsehair and straw, could you do it? And this is an amazing creation right here. And I just think it also goes back to old times, back before we invented the wheel, before we knew anything. How did we get any idea how to build this house or anything like that? We learned it from the birds and the snakes and the otters and everything. So that's all I have to say.
park, and somebody has just brought me this turtle shell. Well, this turtle shell to the turtle is kind of like an armored camouflage Winnebago, one of those. Because not only does it provide him with protection from overexposure to the sun, the cold weather that arrives in winter, and predators, it also just kind of gives him a place to just chill out and draw in whenever he doesn't feel like dealing with the situation around him. And the turtle needs this shell for many reasons, because he's not fast like the deer, he can't fly like the birds, and he can't fight back like a lot of other species like bobcats or things like that. And if you notice the pattern on the outside of his shell, it kind of will help him blend in with the environment around him. And when wintertime comes, he can pull his legs and his head in and burrow down in the mud. And the shell and the skin around the shell form a membrane that is not permeable to the water around him, and it will help him keep his body heat stored inside. In the summer, he's able to go out in the log, and it's kind of like a warm tin roof. Not only does he stick his head and his arms and legs out, but the surface area on the top of the shell will help him to absorb more warmth that he can store to last him through the night, because he is basically a cold-blooded animal, and he needs to take advantage of the heat when it's there to maintain the body temperature that he needs, because at night it's going to cool down and his body temperature is going to drop, and he needs the heat that he's stored up from during the day to keep him warm. Thank you.
I guess I could do this.
Hold it up, Chris.
My name is Chris Cole. I'll also be working at Warriors Pass State Park. I think everybody recognizes what I have here. It's a pine cone, and you know everybody knows it's used for reproduction. I think it's a Virginia pine, and Pinus virginiana, and that's not really important, but I just want everybody to think about what the land is like where this come off from, what it has been. When a Virginia pine is growing somewhere, it's growing on a field, probably an old field, or some disturbances went through, because a Virginia pine is one of the first things they'll come into an area. And it's interesting that nature can just come back and rebuild over like that. I mean, you can have soils that have been destroyed, and a Virginia pine will just come in and take over. And wildlife needs a lot of areas, like they need fields, and they need woods and deep cover, and you have all those different things that they need. And it's interesting when disturbance can come through that it can come back to a wilderness state, and it constantly needs disturbance. I mean, you need fire coming through it, or whatever to disturb the area, and wildlife will benefit from that. And so whenever you see a Virginia pine, you should always think that, you know, that area has at one time been an old field, or some kind of disturbance has come through on it, a fire or whatever. And after the Virginia pine comes in, other trees will grow up, and deciduous trees will come up underneath, because the pine seeds that come out of this won't grow up under pine trees. They don't have enough light, and they just can't live. But a deciduous tree, it doesn't need much light. It'll grow right on up underneath it, and when these trees finally die, why the other trees will take over, and deciduous trees, and then their seedlings will come down, and they can grow without much light. And so whenever you go into an area and look at the type of trees that are around, and if it's a pine, you'll know that it's been disturbed recently, and if it's a deciduous tree, you know that it's been there for a very long time. So always just think about when you go through the woods what it has been and what it probably will be later on. And that's all.
Well, my name is Will Pride, and I'll be working at Standing Stone State Park. And people up around Standing Stone, they're interesting people. What do you guys carry in your pockets? Keys. Knife. Chain. Wallet. Okay, well, people up there, they carry all that stuff. You know, watch sometimes, you know. and some of the younger ones. But can anybody guess what it is?
No.
Rabbit's foot. Rabbit's foot? Yeah. Well, he asked some old codger to, you know, empty his pockets there. He's liable to have one of these in there. You know, what does it look like?
Marble.
It's a marble. Yeah. But so why would you carry a marble? To play with. You know, I just thought that went out to Little Rascals, but no. Up in the hills of Overton, Clay County and southern Kentucky, Monroe County and Tompkinsville, there's a cool game that they play up there called Rolly Holes Marbles. And it's kind of complicated to explain, but I guess if I'm going to give a brief version, it's kind of a cross between marbles, golf, and billiards. So it's you know, they have a little clay court that they keep the though theirs is, you know, flat, smooth dirt, and you know, you dig a little hole, and the object is to shoot the marble in the hole, and you can knock your opponent's marbles away, and you have a teammate, and there's strategies that you use with it. But you guys recognize this as a marble right away, right? But it's what are most marbles made out of? Glass. Wrong. If you're gonna do any decent marble shooting in Clay County, you gotta have a stone marble. And kind of interesting the way they make these. There's way back before they had, you know, electric grinders and whatnot, so they would just find a little area in a creek up in some holler somewhere, a little pool or something where the water was coming down. You know how it kind of rounds it out? Well, they'll find them a decent little rock or something, and they'll set it in there and let the water work it. And with the advent of electricity and the Corps of Engineers and everybody, and they got, you know, electric grinders eventually, and it's a lot easier to take just get you a piece of stone there, and they grind it. But do you think you could grind something almost perfectly round? No? And have you ever shot marbles before?
When I was real little.
Really? Yeah, were you any good?
No.
Oh, well, neither am I. But it's just pretty neat. I mean, these people, they still play these games that have been handed down from generation to generation. And if you ever get a chance, come up and check it out sometime. We have a big marble tournament up there in the fall, so come on up.
Finish with that banana, Bill?
Feel now. There's less to talk about. Oh my gosh, the camera's on.
Volcano eruption?
Yes.
Rocks and minerals 600.
Cooperite is one of the ores from which we get this metal. Rusty?
What is copper?
Correct.
Rocks and minerals for 800.
To aid in recognizing iron minerals, you might take one of these common items with you. Walt?
What's a magnet?
Magnet is right. And now, the presence of this element in halite makes it turn a flame